Hey guys, Coach Victor Robledo here again. And last week I did a short video on adrenal fatigue, and I had a lot of interest. And so I thought I'd create a little follow-up video. I have a few specific questions about how it affected gut health, and we'll get into that. But before that, remember, about 80% of Americans are suffering from adrenal fatigue at some point. So if you're waking up unrefreshed, really dragging through your day, or if you have this feeling of wired and tired, GI problems, aches and pains that don't go away, issues with your libido, it can all be linked to adrenal fatigue. And we can get into a little bit more of the science and what that is a little bit later, but really what I want to talk about is how it affects gut health. I had a question on how does adrenal issues or cortisol issues affect gut health? And so we'll start off with number one, the cortisol linked to gut response. So primarily the adrenal glands are put out cortisol to increase blood sugar availability for the body. So it's put out, we mobilize sugar. If you think about it this way, in a stress response, let's say we're running from a saber-toothed tiger, or a primitive man is running or woman is running from a saber-toothed tiger. We don't have time to stop and eat, so we put out extra stress hormone to mobilize blood sugar so we're available to keep moving and create ATP. And so that's a simple way of putting that. But if you want to talk about gut response and how nothing seems to be sitting well, a lot of people with extreme adrenal fatigue, nothing agrees with their stomach. So think about that analogy that I just used. And I always use something similar, right? I can change the predator. I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to sit down and eat food if your body thinks you're always running from a bear or always running from something. And so that's why one of the big reasons why things don't agree with you, if you're putting out tons of cortisol, that stress hormone is going to make it so it's trying to mobilize blood sugar, and it's not exactly wanting to help you digest. So we have that parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. That parasympathetic is that relaxed state, sort of like when you sleep, or at least when you should be sleeping. I find that a lot of people aren't even in a relaxed state while they sleep. That's why they wake up tense, unrefreshed. And also that's linked to the hormones. So if you're finding that your things are just not agreeing with you, it could be that stress response from putting out too much cortisol. And that's how that's linked to why the adrenal fatigue is linked to high levels of cortisol. And then eventually where you're not putting out any. And then by that point, we evolve to some other issues in the GI tract. And one of the big things with cortisol, is that it also breaks down the mucosa and the lining of the body, of the GI system. And so essentially your GI system, the inside of your gut is a bunch of fingers or villi that allow for beautiful surface area and digestibility. Well, as cortisol is being put out in high levels, that starts to flatten out. And as that starts to flatten out, it also impacts the mucosa, or essentially the lining and that protective layer that exists in the GI tract. So with time, if you have high levels of stress, processed food, bad sleep, too much caffeine, excessive exercise, if you're training excessively hard, in combination with all those things, it can lead to a breakdown of that lining, which you can probably, even if you don't have a firm understanding, that's bad. That's going to really affect on how you're digesting food. And so a lot of people will see food particles coming out the other side and going, geez, something's wrong. And so that's how the cortisol impacts your GI tract, and why you tend to see that. The last part on the short video that we're going to talk about is food in the blood. And I put food in the blood as this little quotations because it ends up being more than just food. If you have a breakdown, like we talked about in the lining and the mucosa, and it starts to flatten out, the permeability of your GI tract goes up. And so things that shouldn't be in your bloodstream get in your bloodstream. And early on in the GI tract, like your stomach, that might still resemble food, but by the time it gets into your lower intestines, that's something else, right? That's something that's a waste product. And so that increase the permeability, right? Things start to get through, end up in the blood. Now, what does the body have to do to deal with that? Well, it sends out, mobilizes it like, oh, we got this stuff out of here. We got to get it out of here. And that creates a sort of a cascade of intolerances that start to happen. So it's kind of, if you look at the 3 steps, all of a sudden you're going from, okay, I just have a gut response. Oh, I'm in a instead of being in a parasympathetic shape, I'm elevated to this fight or flight. That's why food doesn't agree with me. But then we take it a step further and it starts breaking down. If you're doing this for any extended period of time, you're going to start breaking down the lining and start impacting how you're digesting food. And the third evolution here is that the food starts getting into your bloodstream, the particles start in there, and as a response, this is where you're creating an autoimmune response in the body, like let's get this stuff out of here to attack it. And so ultimately, this is how we start to develop food intolerances or food allergies. And so a lot of people, including myself, I went through a big bout of this in my mid-30s. I was kind of allergic to a bunch of stuff and had no idea why. So this is how adrenal health and gut health is impacted by cortisol. And so I hope this video helps you. All the courses I design and everyone I work with, I treat for some level of adrenal fatigue. So you're not alone. It's just something people don't like to talk about, but you have to take some small steps to get there, right? So start taking care of your body, source your food, rearrange your schedule if you need to get that extra sleep that you need. All right, guys, bye.